Today, we're going to get into something pretty fascinating. We're talking about those therapies that use simple touch and tapping to calm our minds. The ones that often get dismissed as a bit out there, but they work. The real question is how? And we're about to unpack the actual mechanical science behind it. So let's just dive right in.
So, have you ever had that feeling where you're just so stressed out, so overwhelmed, that you literally can't find the words? It's like your brain just goes offline, and trying to think your way out of it just digs you deeper into the hole.
Yeah, for a long time, there have been these therapies, things like EFT or tapping, that use gentle physical stimulation to bring relief. But because the explanations often involve things like energy meridians, a lot of people just wrote them off as pseudoscience.
But here's the thing, and it's a big but. The people who practice these methods and the people who receive them will tell you point blank, this stuff works. They feel a real immediate sense of calm. The distress actually goes down. So what's been going on? How is that possible?
Well, it turns out there's a new way of looking at how our minds work that is finally giving us a clear, mechanical answer. And the best part? It doesn't rely on belief or fuzzy metaphors. It shows us exactly what's happening under the hood.
Okay, so first up, let's just really frame this mystery. Why have these methods, which so many people find so helpful, been so darn hard to explain with conventional science?
You see, the old explanations always talked about things like balancing your energy or clearing your meridians. And look, those can be useful ways to think about it, but they don't really tell us what's going on physically. The question we're asking today is much more direct. How does it actually work on a mechanical level?
And to get to that answer, you have to make a pretty fundamental shift in how you think about thinking itself. Because it's not just what's happening in your brain, it's about your entire body.
So the traditional view of cognition is that it's all up here, in our heads. It's about words, concepts, symbols. But this newer, structural view sees cognition as a physical system. It's an architecture that actually extends through your entire body.
And that brings us to this really crucial idea, the load interface. I want you to think of your body as a primary piece of your mind's hardware. It's an interface that's built to handle stress and information, what we're going to call load. So it's not just a taxi for your brain, it's a part of the processor.
Okay, so if the body is part of the hardware, let's look at what happens when that system gets completely overloaded.
All right, think about how it feels to get overwhelmed. When the load is moderate, you can talk about it, you can reason your way through. But as that load gets higher, language starts to break down. Trying to reflect on it just makes it worse. It just adds more load. And then, if you breach that final threshold, the whole system's coherence just collapses. That's what a panic attack or a trauma freeze feels like.
And this is so important. This is why when someone is in that state of collapse, talk therapy just doesn't work. In fact, it can make it worse. The part of the system that handles language is already redlining. It's saturated. You need a different way in, a non-verbal way.
Which brings us right back to the solution. So how do these tapping therapies actually bring relief on a mechanical level? What are they doing?
Okay, so here's the magic. When you introduce a simple sensory input, like tapping on your collarbone or your hand, you're basically opening up new processing channels for all that cognitive load. You're giving it somewhere else to go. This diverts pressure away from those maxed out verbal circuits. It's like opening up new lanes on a gridlocked highway. It stabilizes the whole system and stops it from completely crashing.
And this is the absolute core of it. The relief you feel isn't symbolic. It's not just because you're doing something nice for yourself. It is a mechanical effect. You are physically redistributing the computational load across your cognitive architecture. It's like what engineers do to balance the load on a computer server.
So we can give this a name, structural grounding. And it's really different from just simple emotional comfort, like getting a hug. A hug is great, but this is about using physical, rhythmic input to literally stabilize the cognitive structure itself. It cuts through the system's noise and stops it from shaking itself apart under pressure.
Right, so understanding this mechanical model is super helpful because it also shows us exactly what these methods are great for and what their limits are. One of the most telling, most convincing things about this whole model is that these therapies often work even if you think they're total nonsense. And that makes perfect sense, right? Belief is a really high-level narrative process. This load redistribution is happening way down at the architectural level. Your system just responds whether you believe in it or not.
So this helps us see the proper role for these tools. They are fantastic at stuff like stopping a runaway panic attack,
dialing down acute stress, or just stabilizing yourself in a crisis. But, and this is important, they have limitations. They don't, by themselves, rebuild the core beliefs that are causing the stress in the first place. They don't fix long-term issues or fundamentally change who you are.
And here's the perfect way to sum it up. They regulate the system, but they don't redesign it. And that's not a criticism at all. It's just a clarification of their purpose. These are incredible tools for stabilization, not for a complete identity overhaul.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. What does this new map for healing really offer us?
Well, what this structural model lets us do is kind of translate that older, more metaphorical language into something more precise. So where people used to talk about energy or blockages, we can now see they were describing load and a breakdown in coherence. And clearing or balancing, well, that was just a placeholder for the very real, very mechanical process of load distribution.
And this all leads to a really profound conclusion. When our cognitive system is totally overloaded, when thinking and talking about it just makes everything worse, the body isn't just an option for intervention. It's often the safest, fastest, and most effective place to start.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If your body isn't just a vehicle for your brain, if it's an actual integral part of your cognitive hardware, then what else do we need to completely rethink about how we handle things like stress, trauma, learning, and even consciousness itself?